Hey there, everyone. Um, so a couple things just before we get started. I have my cat snuggled up on my lap, and she seems pretty happy there for the moment. She's very warm, and she's helping to warm me up. But she might get up and move around at some point during the filming of this video, and I'm sure you guys won't mind that. Um, the second thing is something I probably should mention, and that maybe I should have mentioned a while ago, but I suppose it just never occurred to me, is I am kind of neurodivergent. So, without going into too much detail, sometimes it can be a little bit uncomfortable or difficult for me to look directly at the camera, especially if I'm really trying to think of what I'm trying to say. My videos are not ever scripted, and so a lot of what I say is formulated on the spur of the moment with me trying to articulate my thoughts. And so sometimes I need to sort of look off to one side or another or off into a different direction in trying to formulate what I'm going to say. So if you notice that I'm not making a whole lot of eye contact with the camera, that is most likely why, but I will try to look at the camera when I remember to do it. But I just wanted to mention that. Okay, so a little bit of an introduction for the topic of this video. Um, if you're not familiar with Dr. Kirk Honda from the Psychology in Seattle podcast, he is absolutely fantastic. Of course, that's not just my opinion. It's a very popular YouTube channel in the whole sort of psychology sphere. Um, but in particular, what I really like about Dr. Kirk is, first of all, he is a PhD in psychotherapy. He's a practicing psychotherapist with decades worth of experience, um, helping people with a diverse range of issues. But he was also a university professor for over 20 years. I believe he's retired now. And what is wonderful about him is that so much of what he says when he's providing commentary on psychology related topics is backed up by research and scientific study. And I really appreciate that about him. I find psychological research to be incredibly interesting, and I find it to be very satisfying when people back up the things that they say by referring to the research. And I find that to be a huge thing that differentiates commentators who know what they're talking about from sort of lay people who claim to be experts but really haven't looked into the research much. So I really appreciate Dr. Kirk Honda for his tendency to back up the things that he says with research. It's really just very satisfying to me personally. So if you enjoy that kind of thing, you'll probably love his channel. But what's also great about him is he has just such a compassionate and empathetic approach to the people that he talks about on his channel. You never sort of get the sense that he has kind of a personal grudge against particular kinds of psychology issues that people might be struggling with. He just goes out of his way to be very humane and empathetic to the people he's talking about and to the various sort of disorders and mental health issues that people could be struggling with. And I appreciate that he really seems to treat people with dignity, even people who are struggling with significant issues, like narcissism or psychopathy, that those sorts of serious issues that we tend to see demonized on the internet quite a lot. But he really goes out of his way to treat those issues with compassion and to humanize the people who struggle with those issues. Anyway, so I wanted to watch a segment of one of his podcast episodes because I think that the issue that he's talking about here is really interesting. I find it interesting. I think it's something that is, a very kind of worthy starting point for an interesting discussion about, uh, the the issues of texting and friendships and friend breakups. But the other really interesting thing about this segment of his podcast is that he actually addresses dating coaches um, and the harm that dating coaches can do. And so, obviously, if you have glanced at the videos that I've done in the past, or if you know anything about me and my channel, you'll know that dating coaches are a particular pet peeve of mine, and I cover the harmful content that they put out there quite a lot. And I have a real issue with it and how damaging a lot of dating coaching advice can be for people in their relationships. So it was incredibly cool and kind of gratifying to me to see this psychotherapist whom I really respect talking about dating coaching, dating coaches, and the harm that they can do. So let's go ahead and listen to this segment of the podcast. And I'm just going to probably interject and provide my own commentary along the way because I have my own thoughts about these issues, and I think it's just a particularly interesting situation that this woman is dealing with, and that I myself have dealt with in the past, and I'm sure many of you have as well. So um, let's go ahead and bring up the podcast. So there's Dr. Kirk Honda. Psychology in Seattle is the name of the podcast. Okay.
Middle tier patron and YouTube member Cassie from Europe, she says, a friend that was pretty special to me had recently broken my heart. A friend that was pretty special to me has recently broken my heart. I always thought our relationship was good, even though she is generally a bad texter. I always thought our relationship was good, even though she's generally a bad texter.
So do you guys have friends like this, or maybe are you a friend like this? You might have friendships that you consider to be like quite good friendships, and yet they're characterized by infrequent or maybe bad texting. I know I certainly have friendships like this. I can be this kind of friend sometimes, and friends that I have can be a little bit like this. Not so much these days, but certainly in the past.
After a video chat last year, she went for months without replying to my messages, which left me pretty anxious. She went for months without replying to my messages, which left me pretty anxious. Yeah. After she left 2 of my messages on read, I confronted her about this, like there was an indication. I think iPhones do this because I have Android, and I don't think we have that capability unless it's to Android. Anyway, I don't know. I don't like that feature, honestly. Like, if I get an email or a text, I'm not going to ghost people or be a dick about it. But what if I'm, super busy and I happen to see the text or the email and I don't have time to reply for a few days, and it's legit? Well, it could look like I'm just avoiding or rejecting or something.
Yeah, I must say, I've been using WhatsApp for like about 10 years, as many people have. And I very clearly remember WhatsApp first bringing in that feature of the read receipts so that you could elect to see whether someone has read your message or not. And I immediately, as soon as I saw they were bringing out this feature, I saw that this is going to be big trouble. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, I remember when it was first brought out, this feature, there's actually a situation that I heard of a man divorcing his wife over this issue, where he was sending her texts and he was seeing that she'd read the texts and wasn't replying to them. And I just thought, well, this just seems like trouble to me, this whole issue of read receipts. And I've had my read receipts turned off from the very beginning. I've never had them on. Not only do I not want other people to see when I've read their message, but I also don't want to see when other people have read my message and haven't replied. I think it has the potential to be very hurtful, especially for an anxious type of a person, to see, well, this person's read my message, they haven't replied yet. Why haven't they replied? Anxious for anxious people, this can really play on your mind. And so I just like I'm just opting out of this right from the get-go. So I don't know how you guys feel about read receipts on text messages.
Like, I would imagine if I had that, because I think these, when two iPhones are talking to each other, if I had that, I think I would not ever want to look at my texts unless I knew that I had a good hour to dedicate to replying right away. Anyway, she says, Cassie says, after my friend left 2 of my messages on read, I confronted her about this. Okay, she went for months without replying to my messages. After she left 2 of my messages on read, I confronted her about this. She just said that maybe we shouldn't chat with each other. And whilst
I must say, the first time I sort of watched this video and heard about this situation, I thought, oh, maybe the friend who's not replying to the text is being a bit of a bad friend. And I kind of had more of sympathy for the person writing in with the issue, the one who was kind of feeling stressed out and hurt by the fact that her friend wasn't replying. But then I thought, if a friend has gone months without replying to text messages, then suddenly out of the blue confronting them about it, I don't know why you would ever think that that would go over very well. I just, yeah, I can understand being hurt because of someone not replying. But I think what I've kind of learned over the years is to approach situations like that with maybe a little bit more understanding and compassion. And just if you do want to reconnect with that friend, a better approach might be to sort of check in and say, I just wanted to check if everything's okay. I noticed that we haven't spoken in a while. Are you okay? Are we okay? Just a bit gentler. Is there anything that you need? Just kind of coming at the situation with a bit more empathy and compassion is probably a better approach. But if you haven't spoken in months, coming right out of the gate with a confrontation, I think, a lot of us can imagine that's not really going to go too well.
as friends, it's not good for either of us to keep messaging with each other, and this left me quite brokenhearted. Okay, so she wasn't replying to your texts. You confronted her about this. There's a lot of variance there. What was that confrontation like? Was that you attacking her? I'm guessing not, but who knows? Or were you just like, hey, I just feel a little hurt that you haven't replied, or what's going on?
Yeah, so there's so much variation in the way that those texts could have been worded, and it makes all the difference, doesn't it? The tone that we use in text. Because when you're dealing with text messages, you're only dealing with the actual words on the screen. So it becomes so, so, so important to pay attention to tone and, the vibe that you're putting out. And I think just her using the word confront makes me think that maybe she came on a little bit strong, maybe a little bit aggressive. Hopefully it was respectful, but yeah, as I said before, I think we could probably all imagine, uh, situations in which that wouldn't have gone too well.
As a result of this confrontation, she says, maybe we shouldn't chat with each other. And even though we're still good as friends, it's not good for either of us to keep messaging. So it sounds like this friend is saying, look, let's hang out, but let's not be a frequent back and forth texter. And, I respect that. I have friends that I have just learned that, because I'm not I think I'm one of those people that tends to reply to texts and engage, have a little back and forth. I might not hear from someone for months, and if they text me like, oh, this reminded me of our time and blah, 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 and I'd be like, oh yeah, and then, have a little back and forth. I don't just drop the ball. But some people are, and they're not bad people. They're just, not oriented that way, you know. And you know, for those of you that know Bob, he's kind of like that. He just is kind of a Luddite and just doesn't really like the internet or technology or phones or anything. So, which
Yeah, I kind of am a little bit like, well, I don't know. I'm kind of in between. I am the sort of person who's not really overly keen on texting. I if it's someone I'm in a romantic relationship with, or if it's someone that I'm close friends with, as in like this is someone I have a very close relationship with, then yeah, I'll be willing to engage in a bit more texting with that person. But even then, definitely not all day, every day. Maybe one text message a day, or on the odd occasion, a few back and forth text messages. But I'd be quite fine with going a few days in between without texting. I personally prefer talking on the phone or seeing someone in person. My text messages tend to be pretty minimal. But I'm also not going to necessarily ignore a text if someone sends me a text, and not I will generally reply, but I can be a bit annoyed or a bit kind of overwhelmed if someone texts me a little bit more than is comfortable to me. So and similarly, I have friends that also have different preferences when it comes to texting. I've got one friend that I've known for years and years, whom well, she we live in different countries now, but we're still friends, but we only text each other once every few months or so, every couple months. And I have another friend whom I've been close to for 14 years, who is not a great texter either. I mean, he will text a little bit back and forth with me every now and again, but it's usually going to be me sending the last message. And like, I'm not even a great texter. So you can see, like, he's obviously really not a great texter. And I definitely know kind of where his limits are in terms of his comfort with texting. I wouldn't be trying to get into a text conversation with him, probably not even every week. You know, he would find that a bit much. And I've just learned that it's not personal against me. There was a time period when we were still figuring that out about one another. And now, you know, just because we've known each other for so long, there's just that comfort and that level of knowing each other and what feels good to I've just kind of learned to respect what feels good to him, because you know because I don't want to cause him discomfort. And similarly with my other friends, I try to kind of achieve a balance. It's not about, I think in friendship, as in any relationship, it's not about having things all your own way, or all the other person's way. You sort of just uh, in in healthy and well-functioning relationships, I think you just eventually reach a balance. There might be a period of time when you're still getting to know this about one another, but you eventually just kind of reach a balance, um, where you just, you know, it's like a happy medium, or um, a, you know, just a compromise that you can both live with. And I think texting is just one of many issues in friendships that we have to navigate. It's a pretty important one. I mean, communication is an important issue, but some people are definitely bigger texters than others, and that's okay. It really is.
if I were to call Bob, he would answer and we would talk for a long time. So, you know, it's just different strokes for different folks going on. So it sounds like the friend is saying that. She's like, yeah, you know, maybe this tech, you know, I'm not really a reply person. Seems to kind of piss you off. I still want you as a friend. So let's maybe just stay friends, meaning we hang out or call each other, but we're not like daily. Like I guess I am somewhere on the spectrum, because I had a friend years ago who was that kind of frequent texter, like every day, all day long. And I'm just not oriented that way, and it felt laborious to me at times. And
Yeah, me too. I can relate to that. I've had people kind of dip in and out of my life who have been much more kind of anxious and persistent texters. And I'm just not a big texter. I'm never going to be a big texter. And I suppose for me, I kind of require people who are in my life to sort of understand that about me and accept it. They don't have to be the same as me, but I think it is important to have a sort of a level of respect for people's comfort level. And for some people, frequent texting is a bit of a boundary issue. Like they don't like the invasiveness of it. I am one of those people. I'll be willing to text a little bit if I have the time and energy and inclination, but it can be a boundary issue if I feel like it's crossing over into, if it's impinging on my mental and emotional bandwidth, if I'm feeling overstimulated or tired or I'm busy or whatever the case may be, then it can get a little annoying. Um, as I mentioned, I am a bit neurodivergent, and so I really do like it when people respect my boundaries. And I think a lot of people are like that. Texting can be a bit of a boundary issue. And so yeah, we all have different preferences and different needs, and I suppose it's just about learning what those are when it comes to the people in our lives.
Bothered them by not replying right, because sometimes I could reply, but it just felt like I would be, you know, I would be eclipsing other things in my day that I needed to do,
Yeah.
and it would sort of pull me out of whatever I was involved in. I just thought like, I don't feel like I want to be just in a constant back and forth 7 days a week. But, some people are into that. And so you just have to understand that everyone has their own preference. Anyway, going on, Cassie, I sent 2 messages afterwards confessing some of my feelings. Okay. So your friend, so you confront your friend says, maybe we shouldn't be chatting, which I find to be, if I'm reading it right, this is pretty healthy communication, maybe from both of you. Instead of being passive about this whole thing, there's this overt conversation about how often texting is going to happen.
So to me, what I'm reading from the friend is she's really putting that boundary down by saying, maybe we shouldn't really be texting much with each other. That's a pretty clear boundary for someone to be putting down. I think she was already trying to put that boundary down by sort of going months without texting and or without replying to Cassie's uh to Cassie's texts. Her friend is already kind of not replying, and then they have this confrontation, and the friend says, well, maybe we shouldn't really be texting. To me, that's a pretty clear boundary, and it's a pretty firm boundary, really. So for Cassie to go in and then text her again on top of that, you know, I think she's not really hearing what her friend is communicating to her.
And okay, you say, Cassie, that you were quite brokenhearted. Okay, it really just depends on what your friend was saying to you. It's possible your friend was saying, look, I don't know if I want to be that close to you. We'll hang out occasionally, but I don't really want to have that much contact with you because I just I don't like you that much, or I don't prioritize. I have other people that are much closer to me, and you're just sort of a peripheral.
And that's a tough conversation to have, isn't it? Do you guys have any sort of thoughts on how you would have that conversation with a friend where you have a friend who wants to be closer to you than you want to be to them? How do you sort of get that person to back off? And you sort of, how are you able to say to them, look, I do still want to be friends with you. I still want to have you in my life, but I just don't necessarily want to be that close to you. I think it probably takes a lot of maturity on the part of the other person, to say, okay, well, yeah, I can understand that, and that's okay, that's cool. I can sort of understand why Cassie was hurt and brokenhearted about that. That is not an easy thing to hear. That is sort of a form of rejection. That's tough. And yet, I suppose that having that sort of conversation is never going to be easy, although in life, sometimes you do have to have that sort of conversation where you say, look, I'm not really quite ready to be as close to you as you seem to want to be to me. And I think this mismatch of expectations or this mismatch of our wants or needs for this friendship, this is causing conflict between us. And so I think we just need to take a bit of a step back. That's how I'm interpreting that. And it's not an easy conversation to have. Just kind of one of those things, a bit unfortunate. How do you guys interpret what how this situation is playing out? That's kind of what it seems like to me.
That would be hurtful if you define the relationship differently. But there's a possibility that your friend was just saying, "Look, I want to be friends, but I'm not a texter, so let's not chat or text. Let's meet up, but don't expect."
I think it is possible that that's what she was saying. Definitely that possibility exists. And I think you have to leave room for that possibility that this friend is just not a big texter. That's definitely what she could be saying. Cassie doesn't provide a lot of context about the conversations they were having, but it is possible that maybe the friend was just saying, "Look, texting just kind of annoys me, and so a lot of the time I'm not gonna reply." Again, I actually have I have friends like this who are sometimes not great at replying to texts, and I just know that about them, and I don't take it personally because they've already told me that sometimes replying to texts can be a problem. But I also think it's possible that maybe Cassie's friend was just trying to send a bit of a message to Cassie to say, I need you to back off a bit. You're coming on a bit strong here, and this is not really what I want from our friendship.
Back or to feel compelled to text back. And we've had this history now with texting that feels kind of awkward. So I don't know. Let's just put that aside. So I don't know which one it was, Cassie. Was it your friend pushing you away, or is it your friend just asserting something and be, hey, this is the way I would like our relationship to be? But then you send two messages afterwards. I just can't imagine that being a good call under any circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, if someone has said either, if either of those situations is the correct one, either they're pushing you away or they're saying I'm not really a big texter, to then double text them and send another two text messages, emotionally charged text messages, telling them how hurt you are and all this kind of thing. That's just not going to go well. I mean, now you're kind of pushing your friend into a corner. And what are they gonna say to that really? You're putting them in a very uncomfortable position, and it's not that you're wrong to do that. It's just not gonna go well because what can they possibly say to that? This person is obviously trying to take a step back in some fashion from the friendship, or else the texting aspect just feels uncomfortable to them, but you're forcing them into a situation where they have to respond to you via text. It's just not going to be a good situation. And Dr. Kirk goes on to to explain this.
Your friend was being a jerk face. They specifically said, the way that you said it, it's not good for either of us to keep messaging each other. So let's stop. So, if I were a little birdie on your shoulder, I'd be like, don't send those messages, call, or send a snail mail or something, but goddamn, don't text, because this is, even if your friend is okay with texting, this could feel like an aggression on some level, because it's defying what she was asking for, I think, if I'm reading into it right. Anyway. So I sent, and it sounds like, Cassie, for you, this is generated from preoccupied attachment. It's sounding that way to me. I can't know, but, just from what I'm reading so far, because for preoccupied folks, they're much more likely to be frequent texters because they need that reassurance, which is fine.
A lot of the time, when I have a person who's wanting to text a lot or who's wanting a response quickly from me, I definitely get the sense that this is a person with an anxious or preoccupied attachment style. and someone who maybe doesn't have a lot of insight into their own preoccupied attachment style. Because I think it's fine to have a preoccupied or anxious attachment style, but the more time and effort that you invest in getting to know yourself and getting to know this about yourself, the more you can kind of coach yourself not to do things that are going to sabotage your relationships with others. You can kind of recognize when you're feeling anxious, and you can, a lot of the times, if you really do have insight into yourself, into your own attachment style, you can catch yourself before you do things that are going to push other people away. So just wanted to say that as well.
It can result in these kinds of conflicts. And I'm guessing what happened is it hurt your feelings. Maybe at first you're like, okay, we can be friends, but just not text. Okay. But then as the days progressed, you started to be more worried because it was triggering something in you. And then that worry was mounting, and maybe anger was mounting, and you can't take it. And so you send these texts, even though there was a part of you that was saying, don't do that, but you were panicking. I don't know, but it's possible. Or you just thought that the texts would be taken more as an overt communication. Maybe you interpreted the messaging with each other as being something like, well, let's not do frivolous texting, but if there's an intense need for a text, like let's schedule something or a confession of some kind. But, here's just a general guideline. And, I'm old, so this is a product of that. But when it comes to important communication, emotional communication, intense communication like this, don't do it over text or email. 90% of the data is lost because there's no nonverbals, unless you're really good with emojis, which some people are. But even then, it's just not enough. Imagine having parents that only text you. That would be awful, right? We understand that we need human contact and facial expressions and voice inflection, So that if I was a birdie on your shoulder, I would also tell you, wait to have, there's a lot on the line right here. So have a in-person conversation.
This is excellent advice, and I just want to absolutely second what Dr. Kirk is saying here. When it comes to discussing important topics, having important conversations, conversations that have the potential to go wrong in some way or to be upsetting, or if you have a message that has the ability to be misinterpreted, any of the above, don't have those conversations over text. When I started to discipline myself to do this, my relationships improved tenfold. Honestly, just this one piece of advice is so, so, so valuable and important for relationships. If you think about it, so much of our relationships come down to communication. And if you take what Dr. Kirk is saying there, where 90% of communication is in your facial expressions, your body language, the tone and inflection of your voice, touch, presence, emotional content and import. And when you're texting, all you have is words on a screen. And so, it's an awful lot to be investing in a very, very poor form of communication. And so when I really truly got this, I mean, I used to have important conversations, or I used to try to have important conversations over text. And so much of the time, and I'm sure those of you who have done this can confirm this. So much of the time, those conversations would just go horribly wrong. They'd be misunderstood. I would be misunderstood. The conversation would go off the rails very quickly and very unintentionally, and it's extremely frustrating if that wasn't your intention. If you were really trying to have a productive conversation, just don't do it over text. If there's any possibility that things could go wrong, or if there's any possibility that your message could be misunderstood, don't have that conversation over text. And the more important that relationship is to you, the more vital it is that you wait until you're able to speak to that person either over the phone or in person. I mean, in person would be first prize. Having the conversation in person would be first prize, as I say. But if you can't have that conversation in person, or if you'd have to wait for a long time to have that conversation in person, at least have it over the phone, but not over text. You know, it's just not worth it, because you can, as we see, exactly as this situation that he's dealing with here demonstrates, you can derail a relationship and cause damage to your relationships, by trying to have these sorts of important conversations over text. And that can lead to a lot of regret and hurt feelings and frustration. So just don't do it. As I say, my relationships, my friendships have improved dramatically since I've implemented that rule. If I have something important to say, I wait until I can speak to that person on the phone or in person. And yeah, I highly, highly encourage and endorse that advice wholeheartedly. I wish everyone would follow that advice. So I'm so thrilled that he brought this up.
I sent 2 messages afterwards confessing some of my feelings. I also asked for clarification regarding what she meant by not messaging at all, despite us being good friends. Again, I want to remind you, Cassie, you're texting asking why she said don't text.
And I think this is something anxious people can do sometimes, is they get so kind of wrapped up in their own hurt feelings and their own insecure feelings, and the fear of losing someone that they're attached to, that it actually blinds them to what they're doing and what they're saying. And in this case, Cassie is texting with someone who does not like texting, who doesn't enjoy texting, who probably feels quite kind of overwhelmed and threatened by texting. And Cassie is texting this person in order to try and get clarity and confirmation about where she stands. And this is just for those of you who are watching this, and I can tell you from personal experience, this is just never going to go well. Have that conversation in person, or over the phone if possible, and just, even if you have to wait weeks or months in order to have the conversation, it's worth just restraining yourself from trying to communicate these sorts of things by text, especially if you're dealing with someone who is not a fan of texting.
Can I, you say, can I still send her birthday messages, for example? Oh, so you're saying, is it okay for me to send you birthday messages? Again, it's hard to know how she was receiving this. She could have even received this as hostile, but I don't know. Even though verbatim you weren't being hostile, but it could maybe come across that way.
See, that's the other thing with texting, is you can't see the other person or hear the other person. And so even if you don't mean your message or your words to be in any way aggressive or hostile, you don't know what state of mind the other person is in. You can't see them picking up their phone and reading your message. And so you don't know how your message is landing, how your words are being interpreted by the other person. They could, as Dr. Kirk says, they could be being interpreted as aggressive or hostile, or confrontational in some way. And so that's why it's so important to have that closer connection when you're having these sorts of conversations.
But I got no reply. Yeah, well, she's probably saying, well, I told her what the deal is and she's still texting me. So recently I sent an email telling her how hurt I was by this. I guess I was stupidly hoping for a reconciliation. However, she ended up blocking me on Messenger and Instagram. Okay, well, blocking, that's pretty severe.
I mean, it is. Blocking is a very hurtful thing to have happen to you. It's not nice. I would just say my own 2 cents for what it's worth in this situation. If you've had a conversation over text that hasn't gone well, I think trying to communicate via text communication in any way is probably not a great idea until a fair bit of time has passed and emotions have cooled. If it were me in this sort of situation, as I say, I don't have important conversations over text anymore. But if I were in this situation, what I would do is I would just let things settle for quite a while. Because this is a friend and not someone you're romantically involved with, you kind of have the luxury of being able to let a decent amount of time go by where the dust can just settle and emotions can just calm down. I would probably leave it like at least a month or two, possibly even more, maybe even 3 or 4 months, and just give that other person time to kind of calm down and cool down, and not communicate with them via text or email or anything like that. I'd either wait for them to reach out to me, or maybe what I would do is just shoot them a quick, very friendly, light-hearted text to ask if we could meet up for coffee or have a chat over the phone. Very brief, very kind of light and non-threatening, and that's what I would do. And then hopefully get a chance to just explain where I was coming from in person, and those conversations are more likely to go well. But I don't think I'd be sending an email soon after this whole sort of situation has happened. It's just probably going to come across as a bit overwhelming to that other person. That's just my interpretation of what's going on here.
So up until this point in your email, I still don't know what she was intending or what was going on with her. I don't have enough data, of course, but I think there's a pretty good possibility that there was a way to salvage this. Like, in the beginning, when you first started, you say in the beginning of the email, I always thought our relationship was good. I thought our friendship was good, even though she is generally a bad texter. I don't know what you mean by that, Cassie. You might be like, she's kind of a bad texter, just kind of casually saying that. But you could also be saying that like, she's a bad texter and therefore a bad friend.
Yeah, I kind of feel like in our digital age, in the age of social media and the age of constant texting, some people do kind of conflate being a bad texter or being bad with technology with being bad at relationships, and that is just not the case at all. Some people just don't really like communicating or expressing themselves over technology, and that doesn't make them a bad friend or a bad person. And so I think it's just important to be very careful with one's judgment towards people like that. I've read a lot of people talking online about how, oh, this person took 12 hours to respond to me, and sort of making accusations that this makes them a bad partner or a bad friend. If you don't reply to someone straight away or within a certain time frame, then you're somehow being a bad partner or a bad friend, and that's just not the case. We're different. People are different, and they have different capacities, different abilities, different needs, and emotional bandwidth. And I don't think it's right to hold someone kind of hostage to a particular time frame when it comes to texting and when they should be replying in order to qualify as being a good friend or a good partner. We have to, I think, if we truly care about this other person, we have to try and make an effort to understand them and ask them how they feel about texting and what kind of communication avenues they prefer, because we're all different. We could all have different things going on in our lives, different emotions. Um, Neurodivergence is definitely part of it. People who have various neurodiverse um, kind of issues going on, that also affects their ability to text back within a particular time frame or at all. And so I think we really need to be making more of an effort to understand one another and have that empathy and that level of, understanding rather than just making accusations or kind of throwing out judgments like this person is a bad texter, a bad friend. I mean, you can be a bad texter in the sense that you might not enjoy texting. And so you could say, well, I'm a bad texter because texting is just not my preferred way of communicating. As I said, I am kind of that sort of a person. Doesn't make me a bad partner or a bad friend. I can be a very caring and considerate communicator if I'm given the opportunity to communicate within my chosen method of communication. And so, yeah, it's just about, I suppose, being careful not to judge someone overly harshly, but instead to make that sort of effort to understand them and to understand ourselves and what works for us. It's not only about understanding the other person, it's about, who is this other person? Who am I? Is there a way for us to meet in the middle? Can we have a friendship or a relationship in a way that meets both of our needs? Is that possible, or is this going to be too hurtful and difficult for me? It could be that for Cassie, she needs someone who is going to be responsive to her texts. That's perfectly valid. Her anxiety might require her to be reassured on a more regular basis by her friends and partner and family and people that she's in contact with, and that's fine. And I suppose it's just about evaluating, is this other person able to meet my needs in this friendship or this relationship?
For her, she might just have a completely different approach to texting frequency, And so it's possible that the two of you had closeness and a lot of potential at that point, and because of maybe your preoccupation and or their avoidance, because there takes two to tango, so that you could be triggering each other. It has that classic look to me, by the way, but
It does. I think so too. I think it has the classic avoidant anxious attachment trap. If you know about attachment style, you've probably heard about the anxious avoidant trap, where anxious and avoidant people have a tendency to trigger one another and exacerbate the fears of the other person, and can be very tricky if you don't know how to navigate those kinds of situations.
obviously going on with email. I've previously been watching advice being given by dating coaches. I've been watching advice given by dating coaches where they say you shouldn't reach out to an ex until a month later. Otherwise, there will be no chance of getting them back.
So this is where he starts talking about dating coaches, and I love that he's chosen this situation to talk about, and that's it's this particular brand of advice about waiting 30 days to reach out to an ex before you communicate with them. This is one of the very classic pieces of advice that you'll see dating coaches put out there. It's probably one of the most common pieces of advice put out by sort of quote unquote get your ex back or breakup coaches. I have a huge, huge problem with this whole genre of dating coaches. I haven't even waded into this genre of dating coaches on my channel because it is such a minefield, but I probably will at some point. But yeah, Dr. Kirk is now going to say what he thinks about this sort of advice.
Just chiming in. That's ridiculous. Like, to all 8 billion people on the planet, this is what always is going to work. No, there's plus.
Exactly. And this is something that I say dating coaches claim to have a one size fits all solution for a particular kind of problem. And they sort of make these claims that this one solution that they have is going to work in 100% of cases for 100% of people. And they don't make allowances for any kind of nuance in terms of the differences between people. And why is that? It's because they don't have the knowledge or the expertise about how different people approach things differently. There's just no shades of gray or nuance or subtlety in this sort of advice. It's one size fits all. It's cookie cutter. It's black and white because they need to sell products. They need to sell one solution for everyone because they've only got this one solution, and they need you to believe, they need you to convince you that this one solution that they have will work for you as well as everybody else. And it does two things. A, it helps them, as I say, um, to sell their products because will try and get you to believe that one solution will work in every situation like this. And the second thing it does is it bolsters their status as an expert. If they can say, well, I know that this one solution will work in 100% of cases, that kind of creates the impression of themselves as an expert. If they can have a clear-cut answer like that, then it puts themselves on a bit of a pedestal. They have an answer that you don't have. And so that's the reason for advice like that. Just wanted to repeat what I've already said in other videos. Yeah.
There's so many things that we could talk about. One, if someone breaks up with you, there's not a high likelihood of getting them back no matter what you do, because they broke up with you. Because this implies that the person wondering, should I text, wants the person back. So that presumes that the person you're texting broke up with you. Yeah.
Well, certainly not. I think a lot of times exes, people who break up, do rekindle their relationship at some point. But if you don't deal with the issues that caused you to break up in the first place, then you're probably going to run into the same problem again and again. So yeah, it's just trying to implement some sort of magic solution that a dating coach has given you without doing the deeper work to address whatever incompatibilities or issues you had that caused you to break up in the first place is not really going to do anything in the long run.
Anyway, so dating coaches are saying you shouldn't reach out to an ex until a month later. Otherwise, there will be no chance of getting. These are why dating. Okay, God bless life coaches and dating coaches and online experts on whatever, but there are good ones out there for sure, but there are some fucking idiots out there as well, and this is an idiotic thing to say.
I love it. So, yeah, I mean, I would say yes, there are good dating coaches out there. They're very much in the minority, in my opinion. I think the entire industry is quite predatory as a whole, but that doesn't negate the fact that there is the odd person here and there who's a dating coach who is genuinely wise and helpful and beneficial to people. But for the most part, the dating coaching industry is very predatory. It's very sort of grifterish and scammy in nature. Yeah, I love the fact that Dr. Kirk Honda has come straight out and called them fucking idiots, because so many of them, I mean, just, it's just really kind of what you want to say sometimes when you when you look at their advice and you know the potential that it has to harm people and harm people's relationships, and how simplistic it is, how idiotic it is, and how much it is not backed up by evidence and research. It's just it's trying to sell solutions to desperate people, and that's what makes it predatory. But yeah, so I love it. I love the fact that he's coming out and condemning dating coaches. It's makes me happy to see that.
Let's see every single plus, like, what a dating coach should be saying is, look, 99% of you should be grieving and trying to move on instead of pining, because pining is normal and that's going to happen, but strategizing on how you're going to get someone back,
That's the thing, and that's something dating coaches really barely ever talk about, if at all. I don't think I've ever heard a dating coach really talk about the grieving process that's involved in a breakup. for the most part, these sort of get your ex back coaches or breakup coaches are encouraging you to start strategizing from day one of the breakup. They're telling you what to do and, what you need to do when you're 1 week in, 2 weeks in, 30 days in. And I know this because back in the day, I used to consume a lot of this sort of content. So I know the types of things that they say. And nowhere in there is there advice about how to healthily grieve a breakup, which is such an important thing. Going through a breakup is a major loss, and it comes with a lot of very painful and difficult emotions. And you do need to spend a period of time grieving that relationship and going through those emotions and getting support. And yeah, I mean, pining and grieving are totally normal, natural human emotions, and they're human feelings and desires. It's human to kind of pine for the person that you were close to, that you had this intimate relationship with. And it would be wonderful if we could have more people helping us to navigate that process instead of trying to sell us these highly manipulative strategic methods to try and kind of calculate how to get that person back. It's so unhealthy, and you're delaying your grieving process by, you know, weeks or months even. And those dating coaches are selling people false hope as well. It's just it really gets me quite fired up. So I'm going to try and keep on track here.
To get back, and there's a good possibility the person that left you is leaving you because you treat them like shit because you're always scheming on how to control them. Anyway.
I absolutely love that Dr. Kirk has said this. This is a horrible pause. Sorry about that. It's not intentional. But I absolutely love that he said this, that it, it could well be that this person you're in a relationship with is actually fed up with the scheming and the strategizing. If you are consuming a lot of dating coaches' content that are telling you exactly what to do in order to get a particular effect from your partner, in order to get your partner to do this and to do that, I've made this point over and over and over again in my videos. This is very controlling. It's very manipulative. And it's trying to influence the other person's behavior, trying to control the other person's behavior through, manipulating your own behavior and manipulating your own responses to things. And whether or not you realize it, the other person can feel that you're not just being natural and authentic with them. They can feel that you're being manipulative. They can feel that you're trying to get a particular response. And it's going to cause your relationship with that person to not feel natural and authentic. It's going to feel manipulative to the other person. And manipulation and controlling behavior is really wrong. We really, really should not be doing this to another person. It's abusive. It's horrible. It's not a way to treat someone whom we care about. You have to allow the other person their own autonomous decisions and choices and behaviors and feelings. And it could well be that this other person you're in a relationship with is absolutely tired of you trying to implement all these strategies on them and trying to control and manipulate them using all this advice that you've got from dating coaches. Wouldn't be surprised at all if that's the case. And here it's kind of disturbing to hear Cassie talking about how she wants to implement like a 30-day no contact with her friend who's blocked her now, instead of just approaching it authentically and giving her friend a chance to sort of calm down and cool down and work through her feelings, and then having a healthy conversation with her. It's just very disheartening to see the sort of games that dating coaches encourage people to play, and to see the sort of dysfunctional behavior that it creates.
Going on. However, because this is not a romantic relationship, the friendship that Cassie's talking about, and this wasn't really a breakup, well, kind of sounds like a bit of a breakup, I thought the rules would be applied differently. I'm worried that
You see how she even talks about the rules as if there is only one right way to respond to a friend who sort of takes a step back from the friendship and blocks you and um, sort of tries to put distance. She's talking about the rules, as in the rules say that you have to wait 30 days and you have to have 30 days of no contact. I mean, what are these rules? Who made these rules up? These dating coaches are self-proclaimed experts who claim to have the one right way to respond to a situation like this. And these rules that she's talking about really don't exist. It's just something made up by these coaches who who are trying to sell you a solution. They're trying to get their hooks into your emotions and your desperation so that they can sell you something.
Of reconciliation because I reached out too soon and messaged. I think the fact that you messaged her at all, messaged, what I say, the fact that you messaged her at all, Cassie, I think is the problem.
Yeah, her friend has already said, look, I'm not comfortable with text communication. And she's already also shown that with her behavior, not replying to texts, telling Cassie that she doesn't want to communicate over text and then blocking her. I think you really, at some point, you have to kind of take the hint and like this person just really does not want to communicate over text. And so to then message or email someone after she said this is just not a good strategy or not a good. This is not the right way to communicate with this particular person. At this point, I think you really just have to maybe take a step back and think, is this friendship a friendship that I want to save? Do I still want this person in my life? Do I think that this friendship can be saved or salvaged? How can I really listen to my friend? How can I respect them? How can I show that I care? How can I maybe just have the best chance of success if I do want to rebuild this friendship? And reaching out with another message, a highly emotionally charged message, it sounds like that's probably not the right way to go about it. Not, definitely not in with a person like Cassie's friend.
But even then, I don't even imagine it's the texting. It was the emotional content as you were communicating about the texting. I'm guessing it had nothing to do with the texting. It had everything to do with the vibe that she was getting from you.
Yeah, it sounds like if the texting had been just kind of very no pressure and very lighthearted, like if the friend hadn't felt pressure to respond in a particular way, the texting probably wouldn't have been much of an issue. Or at least if I use myself as an example here, I know anytime I've been bothered by texts that I've received, it's more because I get the sense that the other person is expecting a response from me within a particular time frame or in a particular way, or else they're coming on very strong with their text, and that can make me like want to back off a bit. And that's the vibe I get from Cassie. Like she's coming on very strong in her texts, and this is probably feeling a little bit threatening to her friend.
There's a good possibility that she has the other side to this coin, in that instead of coming to there could have been a time when early in this process where she was like, I really like Cassie as my friend, but I feel like sometimes she's angry at me for weird reasons, and she seems like she's anxiously texting me all day long, and I want to have this relationship and I want it to be different, but I don't trust in other people because of my past. So I'm just going to avoid the whole thing. Meanwhile, I'm getting more and more angry and upset.
I relate to that, and I think that sounds pretty accurate to me from the vibe I'm picking up from this situation that's being described here. That probably Cassie's friend was quite happy to be friends with Cassie and liked her as a person, but the texting had an emotional content to it that was just felt too intense for her friend, and that Cassie seemed to be getting increasingly anxious, and this just felt threatening to her friend, and so she was just backing away more and more. Um, and that's not necessarily Cassie's fault. the friend may have had her own issues that she was dealing with, as Dr. Kirk has pointed out. So,
Whole other side to this that she's responsible for, and the two of you just triggered each other.
yeah,
I think there's a good chance of that.
that's what I think.
The last bit of advice is whatever dating coaches you're referring to, stop paying attention to them because that
So you heard it from Dr. Kirk Honda. If you're watching breakup coaches who are giving you this sort of advice, these get your ex back coaches that are giving you this sort of advice, just stop paying attention to them. They're idiots. They don't know what they're talking about. It's ridiculous nonsense.
but shit that I'm hearing. But to address your main
Stupid shit, as he says.
question about whether or not there's a chance for reconciliation, yeah, absolutely. Like, there's so many different paths, but one, I would never text her again unless there's an emergency. Like, there's a forest fire by her house, and you just need to tell her there's a forest fire by her house. I would just abnormally avoid texting because you want to prove that you hear her request.
Yeah, that's what I think as well. People like this, who find this sort of emotional texting to be quite threatening, you really have to give them lots and lots and lots of space when it comes to this kind of communication, just so that they know that you've heard them and that you respect them. And this is what I've found to be very valuable in my relationships with people who are like this. You just really have to give someone a lot of breathing room, a lot of space is the key. And maybe one day after an amount of time has passed, you could maybe ease back into texting, but you have to really keep a close eye on it, and you have to really discipline yourself not to overdo it, and to only, share sporadically and every now and again. And Yeah, and then certainly, you could start to build up that trust, and definitely never have important conversations over text. Um, so yeah, that's what I would do as well. That's what I have done with friends like this, where I can tell the texting or over texting makes them anxious. Just have to pull back and give them space, and give them room. Not because you're doing like a no contact thing or that you're trying to manipulate them, but just because you want them to know, okay, I've heard you. You don't like texting. I respect you. I'm interested in trying to understand you and in making you comfortable in this friendship.
Texting. Call. There's nothing I'm hearing that she is against calling. I wouldn't call every day, but, calling. There's a good chance that since you were good friends or good enough in the beginning of this, that there is something compatible there if you just understand each other and you understand yourselves. And it might be too far down the road. I mean, since she blocked you, hopefully you're in therapy, Cassie. I'm guessing that you are. Most of my listeners tend to be in therapy. So
I mean, blocking is pretty extreme. As I said, it's a horrible thing to have happen to you, to get blocked by a person that you care about or that you were close to. But it's not the end of the world. It can also just be someone's response to saying, someone could also just block you because you're just coming on way too strong and they're finding it threatening and they just can't handle it anymore. And so they block you because you're just not backing off. And so in that sort of a situation, blocking doesn't have to be the end of the friendship, doesn't have to be the end of the world. There could be a way back from that. But you have to then show that you're really willing to respect their boundaries and their sort of sense of space. So yeah, and I love what he says about getting into therapy so that she can understand herself, because I think the most bewildering part about situations like this can be because our own feelings can feel very overwhelming to us, and we can get very overtaken by how painful and anxious how painful a situation like this can be, and how anxious it can get. And so therapy and really self-reflection and learning about yourself can at least help you to explain why you have these feelings and why you react like this. And And that can provide a lot of comfort, and it can also give you insight into how to navigate these situations in a more productive way. I think once you understand yourself and your trigger points and the pitfalls, then you can just work around them a bit better.
There, and then you would get some specific guidance and ideas about what's happening with you in this situation. But you could even have your friend listen to this whole segment of this podcast. If you think that I'm close, and you could if it is close, you could be like, hey, I sent in our situation to this random podcast, and he basically called me out on my shit, and I just want to apologize. And it's a way of acknowledging. I just, you can listen to this segment of this podcast, and he's basically describing what was going on with. But Cassie, I don't know if that's even true. If it's something else, I'm the sort of person that I just believe that if you can just really understand each other, if we can just understand each other, then things tend to work out. So if there was a way to, but first you have to understand yourself, Cassie, right? You can't just approach it like you're a bad texter and that needs to change or whatever. That's not really understanding what you brought to the table.
I love this. I love what he's saying here. Understanding each other, but understanding each other starts with understanding yourself and understanding how you react and why you feel the way that you do about certain situations, and why you behave the way that you do, and where it comes from, and what things trigger you, and truly doing that inner reflection work and exploration and trying to understand yourself. And then once you can understand yourself, that actually also gives you a whole skill set to try and understand other people as well. And from that place of mutual understanding, you can communicate better, and avoid situations like this where you're, you know, kind of unnecessarily hurting each other, or bumping up against each other's sore spots and overwhelming each other and causing each other hurt and pain. So I love that. I love that he says that.
If you understand what you brought to the table, and thus you're remorseful and sorry for what you did based on your past, right? It's not your fault that you have this alleged insecurity. I say alleged because I don't know. I'm alleging, based on very little information. But and if you were somehow able to download that, obviously it's not over text or email. So you could record like a 5-minute little thing. Don't make it too long. You could call them, leave a voicemail. Again, don't make it too long. You could ask just to meet up for 5 minutes. I don't know if that would happen given that they blocked you. At the very least, there could be opportunity for closure there. And also, most importantly, really, Cassie, if there's some issue going on with you, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to investigate, get awareness, and heal, such that the next time this happens, because I'm guessing it will be triggered again, then you're less likely to engage in a pattern with that person that will result in a similar outcome. All right, let's take a break.
Yes, I love that. I love that he is contextualizing this as a real opportunity for Cassie to understand herself and her patterns, because more than likely this situation is going to come up for her again. And if she can just understand why she does what she does, why she feels the way that she feels in situations like this, what exactly it is that the other person is doing that triggers her, and how that causes her to behave, and just take learning opportunities from that, and sort of ask herself what could she do differently next time, and how could she behave more constructively and not sabotage the relationship in the future. Then that's an invaluable learning experience. That's absolutely wonderful. I mean, it can take a bit of time to get there. It really can. This is this is an ongoing learning experience for all of us, and friendships are a wonderful, vehicle for us to learn about ourselves. But yeah, I think for me, the takeaway and the important thing to remember here is don't have important conversations over text. That would be my advice anyway. If you're a very talented texter, maybe you can pull it off, but I think for the vast majority of people, it's just not a good idea to have really important, serious conversations over text. So, let me know what you guys think about this situation. Have you experienced similar situations with your friends? What would you do in a situation like this? What do you think about what Dr. Kirk says about communication, what he says about dating coaches? I'd love to hear from you guys if you feel like sharing. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves and take care of the people that you care about as well. I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.